Abatwa. The Abatwa of Africa are a legendary race of minuscule hunters originally told of by the Zulus as being a menace in their territories, but in the past few decades, the tales told of these beings in English-language media have greatly changed. The first publication of the tale of the Abatwa was in 1868 in Henri Callaway's Nursery Tales, Traditions, and Histories of the Zulus. The stories in Callaway's book were collected directly from Zulu storytellers and then presented both in a transliteration of the original Zulu language and translated into English, so it was as close as Callaway was able to get to bring his readers directly into contact with the Zulu storytellers. Allow me to sum up the tale of the Abatwa, as told in Callaway's book. The dreadfulness of the Abatwa. The Abatwa are extremely small men. They go under the grass and sleep in anthills. They travel in the mist and live in the upcountry on the rocks, and they have no village. They are wholly nomadic and kill large animals with poisoned arrows, and when they've killed an animal, they eat every piece of it, leaving nothing behind. If an area has no more animals to hunt, the Abatwa gather together and ride on a horse's back single file from neck to tail to go look for better hunting grounds, and if they don't find anything, they eat the horse. The Abatwa represent a great danger to the Zulu because they are armed with poisoned arrows that cause uncontrollable bleeding. This is why an Umutwa, the proper name for a single Abatwa, can hunt and kill large animals, but it also makes a single Abatwa arrow deadly to a full-sized Zulu. So Zulu had to be careful in how they treated any Abatwa they might encounter, and there was one major point the Zulu had to keep in mind. Abatwa hated being told or reminded they were tiny. Any indication from a Zulu that they felt an Umutwa was small would instantly result in the Zulu being shot and killed. For this reason, the Zulu have adapted the rather unusual greeting of "I saw you" when encountering any Abatwa. If the tiny warrior then asks the Zulu where he saw them from, the Zulu needs to answer in a way that implies a great size to the minuscule threat, such as "I saw you from that mountain over there." Such a greeting only works, however, if the Umutwa is somehow seen or detected. The true dreadfulness of the Abatwa comes from the very fact that their size makes them almost invisible in most circumstances. An Umutwa could shoot and kill a Zulu who nearly stepped on him without the Zulu ever seeing the being that has killed them. An attacking animal or a murderous man could be faced and dealt with, but the possibility of being killed in a way that cannot be reacted to and that ignores your personal strengths and capabilities is truly dreadful. This worry prevents sleep and rest, for the only comfort is to avoid the territory of the Abatwa altogether. In his book, Callaway points out a very important fact, that the name Abatwa is not only a descriptor for the monstrous minuscule men but also the name used by the Zulu to talk about a neighboring tribe. This neighboring tribe of Bushmen has an average height of just 4 feet, compared to the Zulu tribe's average of over 6 feet, so Callaway felt that the Zulu tales of the tiny Abatwa were probably stories formed from initial encounters with their smaller neighbors. There is outside support for this idea, as it turns out. In a 1915 edition of the journal Man, a correspondent named Mervyn W. H. Beach wrote in with a tale he had been told 2 years earlier while visiting East Africa. Having been told that, if you dug low enough, pieces of pottery would be found that the Kikuyu tribe, whom he was visiting, had not made, these pieces were to be found in areas that were cleared of forests for cultivation. Beach was naturally curious as to who had made the pottery. The elders of the tribe told him the pottery had been made by an ancient people called the Goomba, who had occupied the area in the past after displacing a race of cannibal dwarves called Mathoakiana. A further inquiry about this story was made to some elders in the Fort Hall district of the same land by the district commissioner, and he sent back the following interesting details. The Mathoakiana appear to be a variety of earth gnomes with many of the usual attributes. They are rich, very fierce, very touchy, e.g., if you meet one and ask him who his father is, he will spear you, or if he asks you where you caught sight of him first unless you say that you had seen him from afar, he will kill you, the inference being, I suppose, that you have seen what he was doing, burying treasure, and This is only a guess on my part. Like earth gnomes and most folklore, they are skilled in the art of ironworking. They originally lived around this part south of Mount Kenya, but they were driven out by another legendary people called the Goomba, who dwelt in caves dug in the earth and who disappeared one night after teaching the Kikuyu the art of smelting. Another account says that they lived on earth themselves. It is a Kikuyu insult to say, "You are the son of a Methowakiana." Beach stated that the references might well have been to either the Bushmen or Pygmies, or both. Note the line, "Unless you say that you have seen him from afar, he will kill you," which is a repeat of the habit of telling the Abatwa that you saw them from afar to prevent their anger. It seems likely that both the tale of the Methowakiana and the tale of the Abatwa are based on the first encounters between tall and short tribes in Africa, with each story taking on its own local aspects over time. So much for the original legend of the Abatwa. But, like so many stories from other cultures, the representation of the legend has been changed greatly in its interaction with English language media, becoming something, or so, very different from the original African stories. For around 80 years, the tale of the Abatwa as Callaway published it was discussed off and on in anthropology and folklore journals and books, generally in its connection to the Bushmen of the same name and to the relations of natives of Africa to the Pygmies and Bushmen in various parts of the country. Then the whole story was rewritten and marketed to the public at large. The earliest I've traced the rewrite so far is to the 1987 book, The Encyclopedia of Things That Never Were, by Michael Page and Robert Ingpen. In just 2 paragraphs, this book creates a whole new creature called Abatwa that is only partially related to the original legend. It's worth quoting because it's been very influential since. Abatwa, the tiniest creatures in human form, who live in the anthills of southern Africa. Sightings are rare because the Abatwa are the shyest and most elusive of all creatures in human form. When they do reveal themselves, it is only to children under 4 years old, wizards, or pregnant women. A woman in the 7th month of pregnancy who sees an Abatwa male knows that she will give birth to a boy. The Abatwa are perfect miniatures of African tribespeople, and they maintain a clan and family structure similar to that of the tribes, but they are not a warlike race, and they never seek dominance over the ants with which they share their quarters. They live by foraging for food among the roots of grasses and other plants. As you can see, all that survives of the original Abatwa legend, and possibly all the authors actually knew about Abatwa, was Callaway's first description of the size of these beings, that they go under the grass and sleep in anthills. Whether the remainder is an invention of Page and Ingpen or whether they got this variant tale from another source is still up for debate, and I'll keep digging. Besides the obvious differences, notice the subtle differences that have been added as well. For example, in Callaway's original tales, it is never explicitly stated that the Abatwa regularly live in anthills. It's possible that the storyteller's statement about the Abatwa sleeping in anthills was only meant as an example of how incredibly small they were. Also, the original tales only implied males of the Abatwa race had been encountered, since they were only ever seen hunting, a male activity, and given their otherwise inhuman traits, it does not necessarily follow that the Zulu believed there were females among the tiny hunters. What seems to have happened is that someone, be it Page and Ingpen or a writer before them, simply knew that Abatwa were little people in Africa and therefore assigned them a new story that assumed they were a type of fairy, as in the legends of the little people told in Europe. As a brief comparison with the original tales shows, though, this is an entirely new story, and woe be unto anyone running into a real Abatwa expecting them to be friendly. Oh, and just in case this identification with European fairy lore wasn't made obvious enough, in 1999, the extremely questionable book A Natural History of the Unnatural World simply listed the Abatwa as a South African race of fairies. In the glossary, the book repeats the fact that Abatwa is only visible to children under 4, wizards, and pregnant women. While the legend of the Abatwa was rewritten in 1987, this wasn't generally noted until sometime in October 2004, when a Wikipedia article was posted that was essentially the same as the variant legend above. In South African mythology, Abatwa are tiny humans said to be able to hide beneath a blade of grass and to be able to ride ants. They can only be seen by the very young, by magicians, and by pregnant women. If a pregnant woman in her 7th month of pregnancy sees a male Abatwa, it is said that she will give birth to a boy. This particular Wikipedia article was later replaced with an article about the tribe of Bushmen actually addressed as the Abatwa, and all reference to the legendary monster is now gone, but the damage had already been done. An untold number of websites and books took the basic description from Wikipedia and republished it as the correct idea of the Abatwa, assuming it was verified information. Even though Wikipedia identified the article as a stub, which means a brief entry with no sources, not to be trusted on face value. After that, even more websites and books took the story from the earlier copiers, until there were sites and books with the variant tale that had no idea where the original information came from. In addition, a few of these books and websites also threw in their own new details, but none of this represents the original, actual legend of the Abatwa. So just remember, if you ever happen to run into an Abatwa in the Zulu territories, don't mistake them for creatures that are shy with a peaceful nature. Just tell them you saw them from a long way off and that their great size motivated you to run away.